Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Beneath all the headlines about the big global alliances, there's this whole other layer of diplomacy happening. It's quieter, often. It's where nations build these really specific, sometimes lesser known collaborations regionally or around certain themes just to navigate, well, everything that's going on.
Exactly, sort of the intricate wiring behind the main circuits.
That's a good way to put it. And today we're pulling back the curtain on something fascinating. How exactly does India engage with the world beyond its, immediate neighbors? What are the surprising ways it's shaping things through all these different partnerships?
Right. And our mission today is basically to unpack some of these key groups and strategic initiatives India is really involved in. We're drawing this from the source materials provided.
Okay.
And we want to show you these aren't just acronyms floating around. No, these are frameworks that genuinely impact trade, security, the environment, connectivity, affecting billions of people, really.
Absolutely. So think of this deep dive as like your shortcut to getting some really key insights into India's foreign policy, how it strategically deals with neighbors and the wider world. We'll keep it insightful, clear, and hopefully throw in some details that make you go, interesting.
That's good.
Okay, so to start, let's look at India's immediate neighborhood, this idea of regional integration. Let's unpack the first one. BIMSTEC. What exactly is BIMSTEC?
Great place to start. So BIMSTEC, it stands for the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. Bit of a mouthful, I know.
Just a bit.
But at its core, it's a regional group. Its main job is connecting countries around the Bay of Bengal. So it's literally bridging South Asia and Southeast Asia.
Okay, bridging those two regions makes sense geographically.
Exactly. And it started way back in June 97. Originally just 4 members, Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand. BEC, they called it then. Then Myanmar joined pretty soon after, making it BIMSTEC. And then in 2004, Nepal and Bhutan came on board. That's when it became the 7-member BIMSTEC we know today. The headquarters, by the way, got set up in Dhaka, Bangladesh, but only in 2014.
Right, so it evolved over time. But why was it formed in the first place? What was the gap it was trying to fill?
Well, the official reason is promoting economic and technical cooperation, but, there's often more to it. It really emerged as a kind of more nimble alternative to SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation.
SAARC, right.
Yeah, SAARC had been facing, let's say, limitations.
Yeah.
Progress was slow, often bogged down by, various political issues, including the India-Pakistan dynamic, among other things. So for India, BIMSTEC became this really useful way to link its Act East policy, looking towards Southeast Asia with its neighborhood-first diplomacy.
So it's about creating these regional bridges, especially maybe where the bigger organizations were struggling a bit. And it sounds like India's a pretty big player in this.
Oh, absolutely. India is a major proponent, probably the most influential member within BIMSTEC, you could argue. It definitely sees it as a key alternative to SAARC, especially given how some SAARC projects stalled. It's central to India's goals for both its Act East and neighborhood-first policies.
Got it.
And yet, the strategic importance here is huge. BIMSTEC countries, together, they cover over 1.7 billion people. That's 22% of the world's population?
Wow.
Yeah. And a combined GDP over $3.6 trillion. Plus, the Bay of Bengal itself. It's critical for maritime trade, for security. So BIMSTEC gives these countries a platform to tackle shared stuff, disasters, terrorism, connectivity gaps, poverty. It's about practical cooperation in a shared space.
That makes a lot of sense, a broad regional bridge. But does India also get involved in even more focused initiatives, smaller groups? What about something like BBIN? I've heard that acronym too.
It's a great question because BBIN is the perfect example of that more granular targeted approach.
Yeah.
BBIN stands for Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, just those 4.
Okay, much smaller group.
Exactly. It's a sub-regional thing, really focused on boosting connectivity, economic integration, people-to-people contact, specifically in the eastern part of the subcontinent.
And why this smaller grouping?
Well, it launched in 2015, and it was pretty directly a response to the slow pace of SAARC again. Remember that 2014 SAARC summit? They couldn't get a regional motor vehicle pact signed.
Ah, right. I remember hearing about that.
So BBN was like, okay, let's just get the 4 of us together and figure out how to improve transport, trade, transit, build infrastructure, cooperate on energy, particularly hydropower, things these 4 countries could realistically move forward on. It doesn't even have a permanent HQ. It's just coordinated between the governments.
Interesting. So what are its main goals or pillars?
Okay, so the big one initially was the BBIN Motor Vehicles Agreement, the MVA, signed in June 2015. The idea was seamless movement of vehicles across their borders. Now, here's where it gets insightful, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Bhutan actually hasn't ratified it. They had environmental concerns, which is fair enough. But instead of the whole thing collapsing...
Which can happen with these things.
Right. Instead, Bhutan basically said, okay, you three, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, you guys go ahead. And they have. They've finalized a framework to implement the MVA just among the three of them.
Yeah.
It shows real pragmatism.
That is flexible. What else besides vehicles?
Energy is another big one.
Yeah.
Especially trading hydropower. Think India, Nepal, Bhutan connections and linking up the electricity grids. And then there's making trade and transit smoother, harmonizing customs, upgrading border posts. India's building several integrated checkposts, for example, to help with that.
Makes sense. And India's role here seems pretty central again under that neighborhood first idea. I've also heard about the chicken's neck being relevant here. Can you explain that connection?
Absolutely. The Siliguri corridor, that's the formal name for the chicken's neck, is this really narrow strip of Indian land, maybe only 20-something kilometers wide at its narrowest.
Right.
Yeah. And it's the only land bridge connecting mainland India to all its northeastern states. So strategically, it's incredibly sensitive. Any disruption there would be a massive problem for India, economically and strategically.
Right, a real choke point.
Exactly. So BBIN initiatives, especially improving road and rail links through Bangladesh, offer alternative routes, more resilient connectivity to India's northeast. It helps diversify access and reduces that dependency on the single, vulnerable Siliguri corridor.
This really does show some serious diplomatic agility. You have these like concentric circles, the wider Bay of Bengal with BIMSTEC, and this very specific BBIN group. Why is this kind of granular, tailored approach so important strategically?
Well, I think what's really smart about it is that it allows for actual progress.
Yeah.
You know, where bigger, more diverse groups might get stuck because everyone has different priorities or issues.
Yeah, gridlock.
Precisely. With BBN, you've got 4 countries super closely linked geographically and economically. So making specific deals on infrastructure or transit is just more doable. With BIMSTEC, the shared Bay of Bengal gives a natural focus for broader cooperation. It's about finding the right group and the right scale for the right problem. It lets you avoid that gridlock and actually get things built or agreements signed. It feels like a very practical evolution in foreign policy.
That's a really crucial distinction. Okay, now let's widen the lens again. Let's go even broader to the entire Indian Ocean. I mean, that's a critical zone for global trade, security, and India is obviously a huge player there. Tell us about IORA.
Right, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, IORA. This is an intergovernmental regional organization, and it brings together the coastal states that border the Indian Ocean. What makes IORA really stand out, and this is important, is that it's the only regional forum that covers the entire Indian Ocean region.
The whole thing, from Africa to Australia.
Exactly. Africa, Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Australia, all the littoral states. It was set up back in March 1997, and its headquarters are in Mauritius.
Okay. And its purpose?
The main goal is boosting regional cooperation, focusing on things like maritime trade, security, disaster response, fisheries management, and this big area now called the blue economy. It tries to tackle those shared challenges: piracy, terrorism, climate change impacts, illegal fishing, things that affect everyone around the rim.
Who's in it? Just the coastal states?
Primarily. There are 23 member states, all the littoral countries. Think India, Australia, Indonesia, South Africa, Iran, UAE, Kenya. It's a diverse group.
Yeah.
But significantly, it also has 10 dialogue partners. These are major global powers with interest in the region, like the U.S., U.K., France, Japan, and yes, China's also a dialogue partner.
Interesting mix. So how does it work?
It's consensus-based. Decisions are made by the Council of Ministers. That's the top body. The chairmanship rotates every 2 years. India actually chaired it from 2011 to 2013. Right now, Sri Lanka is the chair. They focus on 6 main priority areas: maritime safety, trade, fisheries, disaster management, academic cooperation, tourism. And they also have these cross-cutting themes like the blue economy and women's economic empowerment.
And India's role within IORA, more than just being a member?
Oh, definitely. India is a founding member, and it's a major driver, especially on maritime security issues, blue economy initiatives, and general Indian Ocean diplomacy within the IORA framework. India's engagement in IORA fits very neatly with its own strategic doctrine for the region, which is known as SAGAR.
Okay, you mentioned SAGAR. That brings up a key question. What is SAGAR exactly? How does it relate to IORA and India's bigger picture in the Indian Ocean?
Right, SAGAR. It stands for Security and Growth for All in the Region. Now, this is really crucial. SAGAR is not an organization like IRRA. It's India's vision, its strategic doctrine, its policy framework for how it engages in the Indian Ocean region, or IOR.
So a philosophy or a strategy, not a group.
Precisely. It emphasizes things like maritime security, sustainable blue economy, regional cooperation, and importantly, inclusive development across the IOR.
When did this come about?
It was first really articulated by Prime Minister Modi back in March 2015, during a visit from Mauritius, actually. And why launch it? Well, it was partly a response to, rising geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific. China's growing naval presence, people talk about the string of pearls idea.
Right, the ports and facilities.
Exactly. That network of facilities that raised strategic questions for India and others. But SAGAR also addresses threats like piracy, terrorism, illegal fishing, climate risks. The idea is for India to position itself as a net security provider in the region, someone who actively contributes to stability.
Okay, so what are its main goals then, if it's a doctrine?
The core objectives are pretty broad but clear. Boost maritime security, promote sustainable economic growth through the blue economy, ensure freedom of navigation, particularly based on UN CILOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
The rule book for the ocean?
Pretty much.
Wow.
And also aims to help build capacity in other regional countries, improve infrastructure, strengthen disaster response capabilities, and just generally deepen partnerships across the whole IOR mainland states, island nations like Mauritius, Maldives, Sri Lanka.
So how does India actually do SAGAR? What does it look like in practice?
Good question. It translates into action. Think humanitarian assistance and disaster relief HADR missions. A key example was Operation SAGAR during COVID in 2020, where India sent medical aid and food to 5 Indian Ocean island nations.
I remember that.
Right? Also maritime domain awareness, keeping track of what's happening at sea, providing naval training or even gifting ships to smaller nations to build their capacity, helping set up coastal surveillance radar systems, and collaborating through platforms like IRRA, but also others like the QOI, the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, IONS.
Okay, you mentioned QUAD, we'll get to that. But quickly, I sometimes hear SAGAR mentioned alongside IPOI, the Indo-Pacific Strategy. Are they all the same thing?
Good point. It can get confusing. Quick clarification. SAGAR is India's specific vision for the Indian Ocean region. IPOI, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, is India's broader policy framework for maritime cooperation across the entire Indo-Pacific, which India proposed at the East Asia Summit in 2019. And the general term Indo-Pacific Strategy usually refers to that wider multilateral approach involving the U.S., Japan, India, Australia, often seen in the context of balancing China. They're not the same, but they definitely complement each other.
Okay, that helps. So bringing it back for the listener, how do IRRA and SAGAR together paint that picture of India's vision for its oceanic backyard?
Well, think of it like this. IORA gives India the multilateral stage, the platform, to engage with all the other coastal states on everything from trade rules to disaster warnings. SAGAR, then, is India's own script, its guiding philosophy and action plan for how it performs on that stage and beyond. It spills out India's commitment and drives its actions. Together, they really show India stepping up, taking responsibility for security and development in this absolutely vital maritime region. It's about being an active, influential player.
Makes sense. Okay, from the Indian Ocean, let's zoom out even more. How does India engage with major global powers and also lead on specific global issues? The QUAD is one we hear a lot about.
Right, the QUD, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. It's an informal strategic chat, really, between 4 big democracies, India, the United States, Japan, and Australia.
Informal.
Yeah, informal but important. The main goal is promoting a free, open, inclusive, and resilient Indo-Pacific region. Cooperation covers a lot: maritime security, supply chains, tech, infrastructure, climate.
And how did it start? It wasn't always around, was it?
No. The original idea came from Japan's former PM Shinzo Abe back in 2007. It kind of emerged as a response to, well, China's increasing assertiveness in the region and a shared desire among these 4 to uphold a rules-based international order, keep sea lanes open, that sort of thing.
So a response to China, partly?
Partly, yes, though members are usually careful how they phrase it. It had an initial meeting in 2007, then sort of went quiet for nearly a decade. But it got revived quite significantly in 2017 during an ASEAN summit. That revival stuck. They had their first leaders summit virtually in March 2021 and the first in-person one later that year in D.C. It doesn't have a permanent HQ or anything like that.
How does it actually work then if it's informal?
It's all voluntary cooperation. This is key. It's not a treaty, not a formal military alliance like NATO. There's no mutual defense clause. They hold annual summits Ministers meet regularly, and they have these working groups focusing on specific areas of climate, health, critical tech like 5G and AI, space, cyber.
Okay, so cooperation on practical issues.
Exactly. Things like maritime security exercises. The Malabar Naval Exercise is often associated with the Kiwati now. Vaccine diplomacy was a big early initiative, collaborating on critical technology standards, working on sustainable infrastructure projects in the region.
That's a really crucial clarification you made, that it's not an Asian NATO, because that's often how it's portrayed, isn't it?
It is, and it's a persistent misconception. It's probably the most important thing to understand about the Kiwati. No mutual defense treaty. Its focus is much wider. Think less hard military alliance, more coordinating on soft power, resilience, and providing regional public goods, as the jargon goes.
Public goods like vaccines or disaster relief.
Exactly. Or coordinating on standards for new technologies, or helping finance quality infrastructure. For India, the Kiwati is seen as a key pillar of its Indo-Pacific strategy. It lets India engage deeply with these partners while still maintaining its strategic autonomy, its ability to make its own decisions. It's about collaboration within a rules-based system, not necessarily forming a military bloc.
That distinction is really helpful. Okay, shifting gears now from security dialogues to sustainable development. India has actually spearheaded a major global initiative here, right? The International Solar Alliance.
It has, yes. The ISA, or International Solar Alliance, is quite unique. It's actually a treaty-based intergovernmental organization. Its whole purpose is promoting solar energy and sustainable development around the world.
Treaty-based. Okay, so it has legal standing.
It does. It initially focused on uniting countries between the Tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, the sunshine countries with the most solar potential. But that was broadened later. Now it's open to all UN member states, which makes sense.
And why was it created?
The goal was to tackle big global challenges. Energy access for people who don't have it, energy security for nations, and of course, climate change. The idea was to really leverage the power of solar energy, especially in those sun-rich countries, to help meet climate goals, like the Paris Agreement targets.
In India's role?
India was the driving force, along with France. They jointly launched it at the big Paris Climate Conference, COP21, back in 2015.
Ugh, I remember that launch.
Yeah, it made quite a splash. The framework agreement came into force in late 2017. And here's a really notable point. The ISA's headquarters are in Gurugram, near Delhi, in India.
Hosted by India.
Exactly. India provided the land, the building, and significant funding, around $27 million for the HQ. As of recently, I think it has 116 signatory countries, with about 94 having fully ratified. And significantly, IC became the first treaty-based international organization to be headquartered in India. The UN General Assembly even gave it observer status in 2021.
That's quite a statement of leadership from India. How does ISA work?
Decisions are made by the ISA Assembly, that's the main body, meets annually. They focus on deploying solar tech, things like solar lighting, solar pumps for farming, rooftop solar, also crucially mobilizing finance, getting investment into solar projects, building capacity through training, and working on grid integration and storage. One really ambitious project is the One Sun, One World, One Grid, or All-Swag idea, trying to link solar grids across borders.
Wow, that's a huge vision. What's fascinating, though, is how India balances these global initiatives like ISA with very specific regional ties, like its relationship with Africa. Tell us about the India-Africa Forum Summit, IAFS.
Right, the IAFS, it's the main official platform for high-level talks between India and African nations. The goal is strengthening ties across the board, political, economic, development cooperation. It's also about deepening those historical links India has with many African countries and promoting South-South cooperation.
South-South, meaning cooperation between developing nations.
Exactly. Sharing expertise, resources, development models among countries in the Global South. IAFS was really set up to revitalize India's engagement with Africa, offering perhaps a different partnership model, often contrasted with China's approach, with more emphasis on capacity building, trade, tech transfer alongside infrastructure.
When did these summits start?
The first one was back in 2008 in New Delhi. They happen every few years at the head of state or government level. What changed significantly at the third summit in 2015 was that India started inviting all 54 African countries, represented via the African Union as well. Before that, it used a smaller representative formula. It's jointly hosted by India and the AU. Leaders get together, discuss bilateral stuff, regional issues, and map out development partnerships.
And India backs this up with real resources, right? I saw a figure about lines of credit.
Yes, India has committed substantial resources. over $10 billion in lines of credit to Africa over the years.
10 billion. What does that actually mean on the ground?
Well, those lines of credit support concrete projects. Think infrastructure like railways, power plants, irrigation systems. But it's broader than just loans. India provides a lot of educational support, thousands of scholarships. They run these teleeducation and telemedicine platforms, EV Bharati and eRojha Bharati, linking Indian universities and hospitals with Africa.
Using technology for outreach.
Exactly. Plus, capacity building through India's ITEC program technical training. India is also a huge contributor to UN peacekeeping forces in Africa. And then there's health cooperation, medical aid, pharmaceutical exports, vaccine support during the pandemic. It's quite a comprehensive package, really, covering many sectors highlighted in the last summit, like health, climate change, agriculture, and infrastructure.
It certainly sounds comprehensive. Okay, one more key forum to touch on. Where else does India engage with a wide range of players, especially in the broader Indo-Pacific? Let's talk about the East Asia Summit.
Right, the EAS, or East Asia Summit. This is a regional leaders forum. It's primarily for strategic dialogue and cooperation on the big political, security, and economic issues across the Indo-Pacific. What makes the EAS quite special is that it's the only forum led by leaders that brings together all 10 ASEAN members plus 8 major dialogue partners.
And who are those 8 partners?
It's ASEAN plus India, China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. So you can see it includes all the major players in the region, including all 4 QIDE members.
That is a significant gathering. When did it start?
It was established back in December 2005. The first summit was in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The main idea was to promote peace, stability, economic prosperity. It acts as a platform for building confidence, discussing potentially tricky issues like maritime security in the South China Sea, counterterrorism, non-proliferation, but also things like sustainable development, cybersecurity, the blue economy. It doesn't have its own HQ. It kind of operates under the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta.
And how does it function? Is it making binding decisions?
It meets annually at the head of state or government level, usually alongside ASEAN meetings, but mainly dialogue-oriented. It doesn't really have permanent decision-making power like, say, the UN Security Council. It's more about discussion, setting agendas, building understanding. Focus areas cover politics, security, economy, environment, health, education, culture. Pretty broad.
And India's place in the EAS?
India's been there from the start, a founding member since 2005. For India, the EAS is a really important platform. It helps advance its Act East policy, promotes broader Indo-Pacific cooperation, and allows India to advocate for that rules-based international order it favors. India actively participates in discussions, especially on maritime security, cybersecurity, connectivity, and India often hosts EAS-related workshops or conferences on topics like renewable energy or disaster response, showing it's an active participant.
Wow. Okay, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today. It's quite something, isn't it?
It really is.
Looking at everything from these very specific regional needs tackled by groups like BBIN, all the way up to these broader global challenges addressed in forums like the QIDE or ISA, it really paints a picture of, well, the sheer diversity and the strategic depth of India's global engagements. It seems clear how these different frameworks, they all serve slightly different purposes, but together they contribute to India's bigger foreign policy goals and its, growing influence on the world stage.
That's absolutely right. I think the core takeaway for you, the listener, really is just how multifaceted and frankly adaptive India's approach to international relations is.
And adaptive, yeah.
It's using all these different platforms, nimble sub-regional groups, comprehensive doctrines like SAGAR, big global alliances, specific thematic organizations like the ISA strategically to push its interests, whether that's security, economic growth, or sustainable development. You can really see how India's domestic priorities, like Act East or Neighborhood First, get translated into action through these external forums.
It really is that aha moment, isn't it? Seeing how each piece, BIMSTEC, BIBIN, IORA, SAGAR, Quad, ISA, IFS, ESS, while distinct, fits into this larger, pretty sophisticated puzzle. It shows a really nuanced approach to diplomacy, one that seems to be constantly adjusting.
And maybe that leads us to a final thought for you to chew on. Thinking about all these different initiatives, this layered approach India is taking, what does it suggest about the future of multilateral cooperation itself, especially in a really fast-changing world? And maybe how might other countries learn from this kind of multi-pronged strategy as they try to redefine their own roles on the global stage? Something to ponder.